we've got a bit of a problem here. Super 8mm fans, I bought an R10 Super off of eBay and it got delivered to my home. Unfortunately, but not unsurprisingly, this camera from the 1970s did not have a functioning electronic exposure meter. I'm gonna guess the servo is toast. I tore this camera down limb from limb to try to tell you why your manual override is not working and what I learned along the way. There's no other information about this on the internet, so I thought I'd create a video, and effectively all of this comes down to this one tiny part. Despite all the obvious gorgeous engineering, the engineers of the R10 Super did not think it was mandatory to make a geared servo for their manual override for the aperture. No, instead it is a rubber grommet. Your manual override on your R10 is not working because your rubber grommet is probably dried out and not creating the requisite friction to activate the plate on the inside I'm about to show you. That's havoc and death. Folks who have this camera know that the manual override wheel is right here, and it's something that you pull up on to engage this arm. We're just gonna get this out of the way and show you what's underneath here. That wheel is connected to this pop-up control arm that typically rotates, and when it does, it spins this little spludger and makes contact with this right here. So that rubber piece rotates, hits this, and is supposed to rotate it back and forth. As you can see when I do this, this is what activates the aperture. That's right, it is not geared, it is simply friction based, and you get the idea of what I'm showing you here, that this is supposed to be able to move that back and forth when it rolls, and unfortunately it doesn't freaking work. So what it means is that if you're an R10 Super user, you could have a completely working camera that just doesn't have the manual override for you to dial in the aperture to get the proper exposure, effectively bricking your camera. And as a special bonus, since there doesn't seem to be any video of this anywhere on the internet, if you wanted to know what an R10 Super looks like disassembled, here you go. Kind of like when C-3PO gets his ass kicked. Another thing that's crazy to note here is for how renowned this lens is, Nikon took great pains to ensure that you couldn't take it off this camera and use it on any other. They have bolted down every assembly to make sure that there's no usable mount. This lens is never ever supposed to be removed from this camera, and it's certainly not going to get used on any other thing. It's just not even possible. What they could have never planned for is how people would be using these things decades later, and if they had merely required putting an aperture ring on their lens barrel, it would probably make so many of those models that are still floating around out there in the ether still usable today. But because these manual overrides have also dried out on those cameras, along with the malfunctioning of the EE servo motor, a lot of these cameras that would have otherwise worked are now bricks.
I've advanced the plot a little bit. I think we got a working solution. I wrapped that spludger in a few layers of gaff tape and then also sealed this up so they couldn't spin interdependently, which was another problem. And then I put some gritty skateboard grip tape on this piece. And so now when I twist this, we actually have activation. I think this is gonna work. This is also not meant to be able to have hard stops. Oh, looks like I just, nope, there it is, it's back. This is gonna be really imprecise. It'll never be geared, but it's not gonna go anywhere now, and we are able to activate our aperture. One more point of friction I deleted was just getting rid of the connection here to the bogus servo EE motor. This little arm used to be connected right in here. Now it's not because the motor doesn't do anything, so that's one less point of friction that this no longer has to connect to that, and it's able to just spin freely and open and close the aperture. So hopefully it puts less tension on that piece that I just repaired in there wherever it went, and that'll work out better. As an additional bonus for you guys, I'm gonna move this little logic board out of the way. This piece right here is actually where the auto exposure servo begins. It shines light through here, and then there's actually a photo sensor right there. And that's what takes the reading, which sends it through all these gizmos and basically feeds it into this motor here, which adjusts that arm to do aperture automatically. Too bad it doesn't work. I guess it's time to try to put this mess back together and see if it works. And we're back in business with the skeleton camera. It works. And the motorized zoom still works. I can now officially roll aperture. Here we are looking down the lens barrel, and look at that aperture needle move now. It didn't used to do this because it wasn't making contact. Now I can roll that in. As you can see, it's not extremely precise. I have to kind of roll it and then it flips around. But generally speaking, with a little bit of finesse, let's turn it to like, I don't know, 5.6 or something, probably like right in there. How about F8, T16, whatever, it's working. So cool.